I just wish I could be in Sri Lanka in real life, but this will have to do. The past few months have just been unprecedented for all of us. From being in complete lockdown and working from home, to facing some really, really challenging times. We've all been through these months in our own unique ways. Working from home all the time, I've got to know our cats pretty well. And between us, we've done a lot of jigsaws. But, thanks to technology, we're still able to come together as a community for work as well. And thanks to our Google Developer Group partners, I'm just so happy to be here today with all of you to present some of the latest updates to the web that we shared at our global event, Web.dev Live. Now, when coronavirus went global, we felt the need to stabilize. And this resulted in us pausing Chrome releases and temporarily rolling back the same-side cookie changes. We wanted to give developers the time to focus their energy on keeping their sites healthy. And to help with that, we built web.dev/COVID-19, which is dedicated to best practices that you can follow in times of like traffic surge and network issues, as well as all the other challenges that you face, many sites have faced in businesses, like moving to an online-only model really quickly. There's actually a lot of great advice on that page for any site at any time, and I really recommend taking a look at that. That's web.dev/COVID-19. Lots of great stuff there. But it was really heartening to see the entire community stepping up to help, from providing critical information to users about the pandemic in the United States, to stepping up like right across the world. It's been just great to see these developers, many others, focusing on accessibility, resilience, and performance in these times. And to help with this, we've made some announcements over the last few months that we'd like to share with you here. So let's begin with Web Vitals. This is an initiative by Google to help business owners, marketers, and developers identify opportunities to improve user experiences. The initiative simplifies performance measurement and helps you focus on the metrics that matter most, the core Web Vitals. We believe that core Web Vitals are relevant to like all web pages and every kind of site. And core Web Vitals represent the best, available signals that developers have today to measure the quality of experience on the web. Now, we do appreciate that these signals are not perfect, they'll never be perfect, and the web is always changing, so future improvements or additions will be likely. And the current set of metrics for 2020 focuses on 3 aspects of the user experience. That's loading, interactivity, and visual stability. The loading pillar relates to the interruptions the user might experience while navigating between pages. Loading metrics correlate to interruptions due to waiting that are obstacles to good experience. The interactivity pillar focuses on distractions and errors from low responsiveness. Now, this is critical because, as you know, like delaying something the user expects to be instantaneous can often lead to problematic interactions. For example, we know from research that many users click on buttons multiple times if they don't get immediate feedback. This could be a real problem for like an add to cart button. And finally, the visual stability pillar focuses on the stability of components while the page loads and renders and becomes interactive. Now, we found that page components, moving about during page load is a major frustration for many users. So in 2020, there are 3 metrics that correspond to the 3 pillars of core Web Vitals, and that's LCP, FID, and CLS. These are all measurable in the field, so they reflect real-world user experience, not just something from like your desk in your office. So largest contentful paint, or LCP, measures loading performance. And for a good user experience, LCP should occur within 2.5 seconds of when the page first starts loading. First input delay, or FID, measures interactivity and should be less than 100 milliseconds. Cumulative layout shift, or CLS for short, is a measure calculated for visual stability, and it should be less than 0.1. Now, we suggest measuring these metrics on the 75th percentile to make sure that you're achieving these targets for most of your users across mobile and desktop devices. So in other words, at least 75% of your page views should get a good score for each of the metrics. So let's go into a little more detail for each of these metrics. Largest contentful paint, LCP, measures when a page-to-page navigation appears complete to a user. Previously, we used first contentful paint and other indicators, but in testing, we found that LCP is actually the most impactful to users. Now, as the name suggests, LCP reports the render time of the largest content element visible within the viewport. It considers images, video elements with background images, block level elements containing text nodes, or other inline level text elements, children, and so on. So a single page, it's worth bearing in mind, may have multiple LCP targets, but the last one occurring should be considered the LCP score indicator, or as we call it, the related node. Now, first input delay measures the time interval between when a user first interacts with a page, for example, clicking a link, and the time when the browser is actually able to respond to that interaction. Now, in general, an input delay happens because the browser's main thread is busy doing something else. And one other common reason could be that the browser is busy parsing and executing large JavaScript files in your app. You can find an example on this, like the chart here, that explains how downloading large JavaScript files may delay the user input response because of long JavaScript tasks. First input delay typically occurs between the first contentful paint time and time to interactive. Cumulative layout shift. This is a metric to measure the sum total of all the individual layout shift scores for every unexpected layout shift that occurs during the entire lifespan of the page. A layout shift occurs anytime that a visible element changes its start position in the viewport between two frames. The layout shift score is a product of two measures of that movement, the impact fraction and the distance fraction. The impact fraction measures how unstable elements impact the viewport area between two frames, and the distance fraction measures the distance that unstable elements have moved relative to the viewport. So you can learn more about the JavaScript APIs that are behind each of the core web vitals, and what kinds of studies we put in place in order to define the thresholds. Okay, but what about the kind of real-world impact of web vitals? Well, we did research on millions of page impressions, and we found that if a site meets the web vital thresholds, users are 24% less likely to abandon the page before the first content is painted. Just to repeat, following the Web Vitals guidelines can lead to a 24% reduction in page abandonment. So that's pretty solid. Anyway, the same metrics also plan to be included in the new page experience search ranking, among other signals, in order to provide a holistic picture of the quality of the user's experience on a web page. Now, timing is still in discussion, so no immediate action is required, and we are aiming to provide at least 6 months notice before the change will roll out. You can find out more about this on the Webmaster Central blog. So, what's next for tooling? Well, all Google's popular tools, you'll be glad to know, now support core web vitals. Shameless self-promotion, but you can actually test out Web Vitals for multiple web pages with the Node app I wrote, which is called Multi-House. And as mentioned before, I believe, we've also added a Chrome extension to allow anyone to track the core Web Vitals of any web page. And finally, we've launched a JavaScript library for you to be able to integrate Web Vitals in your development process quickly and easily. Web Vitals is a tiny, less than, about 1K a modular library that makes it really simple to record and report Web Vitals metrics. Now here's a slightly longer example that shows you how to use Web Vitals to record metrics and report them to your analytics backend. So, okay, there's all this stuff. Where do I start? Where do you start? Well, two things. First, step one, go to PageSpeed Insights. That'll give you Web Vitals metrics for your site, both in the field and in the lab. So check that out. From the Crux data set, you'll be able to see whether or not 75% of your loads are hitting the core Web Vitals thresholds for each metric in the field, for both your page and for your origin. And then you can take a look at your lab data from Lighthouse to see whether or not you're hitting the core Web Vitals thresholds for each metric in a synthetic testing environment. Now this helps you, guides you really towards actionable opportunities to improve your page's performance. So step two, check out the talks that we shared at web.dev live. These can help you learn more about tools and techniques to measure and optimize against core Web Vitals. So speaking of tooling, I'm really excited actually to be able to tell you about this new initiative built by a bunch of colleagues of mine, which is called Tooling Report. So yeah, the folks at Google Chrome Labs they built stuff like Squish and Prox, as well as the website for Chrome Dev Summit. And as with any web development project, I generally start by discussing project infrastructure like the hosting environment, the frameworks, and the build tool setup. And all this evolves as the project progresses. New plugins are added in order to accommodate new frameworks or techniques, or the way you write code has changed so that build tools better understand what you're trying to achieve. Now, throughout this process, the Google Chrome Labs team often found that tools that they select end up getting in their way. And this experience led them to investigate what different build tools can and cannot do. So Tooling Report gives you an overview of the features supported across a selection of web build tools. Now this can help you choose the right build tool for your next project, decide if migrating from one tool to another is worth it, or to work out how best to adopt a tool's best practice into your existing configuration and code base. Tools have different focus areas and don't cater to all needs equally well, of course. There's always this question of trade-offs. So with Tooling Report, trade-offs at play and to document how to follow best practices with any given build tool. So how can you evaluate and compare build tools in one place? Well, the team approached this by writing test cases. For each tool, they wrote a build script to check if the tool can fulfill the test's success criteria. Now, as an initial set, they decided to investigate Webpack version 4, Rollup 2, and Parcel 2. They also tested Browserify and Gulp, since a large number of projects still use this setup. So for a test to pass, only publicly documented features of the tool or a plugin for the tool can be used. And of course, we worked with the authors of the build tools to make sure that we're using the tools correctly and that we're representing it fairly. So the tool specifically focuses on how to deliver fast, responsive, and smooth user experiences, intentionally excluding tests for developer experience, in order to avoid measuring for different priorities. So the tests are grouped into categories to give you a quick sense of which tool is excelling in which category. And you can also inspect each test individually, which is where Tooling Report actually gets really interesting. Now, the dedicated test page shows the build tools, how they're scoring on a specific test. The dedicated test page also contains a long-form description as to why this test is important, how the test was codified, and what the expected outcome is. So clicking the GitHub logo takes you to the minimal test project that we created to determine the tool's score. And by the way, this, in this way, Tooling Report not only tells you which best practices a tool can and cannot follow, but it also functions as a source of documentation. Speaking of tooling, web developer tools, I just want to take you through some of the fantastic updates we've had in Chrome DevTools. Some brilliant stuff here. So first up, do you get sick of console spam? Are you sick of browser messages, that tell you problems but not how to fix them? Well, the Issues tab is here to help. The Issues tab is a new way for Chrome DevTools to help you find and fix problems with your website. Now, if Chrome DevTools detects any issues on your page, you'll see a warning like this that takes you to the Issues tab. Now, you'll notice that for the moment, warnings that used to show up in the console still do, as well as in the Issues tab. So once you're on the Issues tab, you might need to click the Reload Page button. Just be aware of that, since DevTools can't collect requests while it's closed. The Issues tab groups issues by type. It makes things easier to understand. And you can see from the screenshot here that issues are reported in the console as well. But notice how difficult they are to understand there. Like, for example, the cookie warnings here. It's just not clear what needs to be done to fix the issues reported. Well, the Issues tab makes a much more structured and pragmatic approach. So click on an item in the Issues tab to find out what's causing a problem and how to fix it. You'll see that each item has 4 components. There's a headline describing the issue and a description that provides context and a solution to the problem. Then there's an affected resources section that links to resources within the appropriate DevTools context, such as the network panel. And then there are links to further guidance. So you click on a resource link to view the item in the appropriate context. And in this example, there's a problem with cookie CK02, and you know exactly how to fix it. Now, you can also go the other way. You can right-click on an item within DevTools to show issues associated with it. The initial version of the Issues tab checks for 3 types of issue. That's cookie problems, cross-origin embedded policy, co-op issues, and mixed content. And future versions will support many more issue types. So let us know what you think, please. How we can improve the Issues tab and what features you'd like to see. So to do that, you can file a bug report or just send a tweet to Chrome DevTools or reply to this video. So we've also added Web Vitals support to DevTools. In the DevTools timeline, along with the core Web Vitals metrics such as LCP, you can see other related metrics that are meaningful and important to developers. Additionally, because core Web Vitals are all field metrics, we want to ensure that you can still measure and track them in lab data tools such as Chrome DevTools. So for real user-based metrics like FID, we've got TBT, that's total blocking time, as a kind of lab equivalent that can be used to track and diagnose your real user performance of first input delay. So in this example, the page has long tasks. That means that they're taking more than 50 milliseconds for the browser to make the content interactive. So what we do here is to show this with candy striping on the task, and you can see also the red triangle in the top right corner. Now, the candy striping kicks in at 50 milliseconds, so everything on its right is basically time spent over and above the threshold. So the total blocking time can be thought of as the amount of candy striping you have in your recording for this task. We also integrate layout shift, which shows visual stability. Chrome DevTools gives details for page components with problems and highlights areas of the page that moved. You can see there. New position there. And finally, if you want to get a live view of layout shifting, you can go to the Rendering tab in Chrome DevTools and click on the Layout Shift regions. Maybe an item there, and you can check out what's going on there. Now, we've also added WebAssembly debugging to Chrome DevTools. Just do beware that this is still experimental. Now, if you're writing your code in C or Rust, but you want to debug your code just like you do with standard JavaScript, that's something we now support. So you can now include a breakpoint in your C code that you've compiled to WebAssembly. And you can also see the call stack on there that allows you to see the calls that are going from the JavaScript into the C and so on. I think this is an amazing piece of engineering. Anyway, this blows me away. But the Chrome DevTools team have also been looking at ways, to help make sites and apps more accessible. They've added color vision deficiency emulation to show how a page's colors and contrast changes with various vision deficiencies. Now, vision deficiencies aren't an off-on thing, though. Of course, they're a spectrum where people experience everything from a mild deficiency to something very acute. So we've implemented the most acute form of each deficiency listed. The theory being that if you optimize for the most acute case, then everything up to that will also be included. So in this case, I've given an example where I've emulated Tritonopia. Pronounced that correctly, I hope. Anyway, so I've covered Chrome DevTools, but what about Lighthouse? Lighthouse just announced version 6, and this has new metrics, including Core Web Vitals, new audits, and a new performance score. Let's start with updates to the perf score. So on a high level, we want to make sure that you can get a sense of your loading performance, interactivity, and layout predictability. So the metrics and the weights of those metrics that formulate the top level score are intended to give you a balanced view of your user experience quality against critical dimensions. There's also a really nifty scoring calculator to help you explore the performance scoring. The calculator gives you a comparison between version 5 and version 6 scores as well. And when you run an audit with Lighthouse 6.0, the report comes back with a link to the calculator with your results populated. Lighthouse version 6 also offers quite a few new audits with a focus on JavaScript analysis and accessibility. So all of the products that Lighthouse powers are updated to reflect the latest version, including Lighthouse CI, which enables you to easily measure your core web vitals and pull requests before you've merged and deployed. PageSpeed Insights, PSI, reports on the lab and field measurements for a page on both mobile and desktop devices. Now, the tool provides an overview of how real-world users experience your page, which is powered by the Chrome UX report, and a set of actionable recommendations on how you can improve page experience, and that's provided by Lighthouse. So PageSpeed Insights and the PageSpeed Insights API have also been upgraded to use Lighthouse 6.0 under the hood and now support Core Web Vitals in both the lab and field sections of the report. Core Web Vitals are annotated with a blue ribbon, you can see here. And from the Crux dataset, you'll also be able to see whether or not 75% of your loads hitting, the Core Web Vitals thresholds for each metric in the field for both your page and your origin. And then you can take a look at your lab data from Lighthouse to see whether or not you're hitting the Core Web Vitals thresholds for each metric in a synthetic testing environment, like I mentioned before. And this helps to guide you towards actionable opportunities, to improve your page performance. So the Core Web Vitals report in Search Console helps you identify groups of pages across your site that require attention based on real-world field data from Crux. URL performance grouped by status, metric type, and URL group, groups of similar pages, helps you out there, and the report is based on the 3 Core Web Vitals metrics, LCP, FID, and CLS. And it's a great way to identify pages that need your attention on your site. The Chrome UX report is a public data set of real user experience on millions of websites. It measures field versions of all the Core Web Vitals. So even if you don't have RUM, like real user measurement, implemented for your site, Crux can provide a quick and easy way to assess your Core Web Vitals. And the newly redesigned Crux dashboard allows you to easily track an origin's performance over time. And now you can use it to monitor the distributions of all the Core Web Vitals metrics. Now, to get started with the dashboard, check out our tutorial on web.dev. We've introduced a new Core Web Vitals landing page to make it even easier to see how your site is performing at a glance. There's also a new Crux API for you to use, built from the ground up to provide developers with simple and fast and comprehensive access to field-based user experience data. Developers can query for an origin or URL and segment results by different form factors. The API updates daily and summarizes the previous 28 days worth of data, including your core Web Vitals performance. We're excited to integrate more features over time to enable new ways to explore the data and to discover insights about the state of user experiences. So web.dev, of course, is your go-to place for guidance on web development. It now also sports the canonical page for information about Web Vitals. The web.dev measure tool allows you to measure the performance of your page over time, providing a prioritized list of guides and code labs on how to improve. Its measurement is powered by PageSpeed Insights, which has Lighthouse 6.0 under the hood, of course, and fully supports the core Web Vitals metrics, as you can see here. There are a slew of other amazing tools to help support you with measuring, optimizing, and monitoring your core Web Vitals. And Google's official WordPress plugin, Sitekit, also has Web Vitals support. With Sitekit, you get insights about how people find and use your site and how to improve and monetize your content directly in your WordPress dashboard and how you're performing against core Web Vitals. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing so many great ecosystem players and production monitoring solutions already implementing support for core Web Vitals. So we're really delighted with this, and thank you everyone for your awesome work with that stuff. Speaking of WordPress and Web Vitals, I'd just like to finish by telling you about, this is a really brilliant initiative from the AMP team, which is Web Stories. Now, this is a new, really immersive, fast-loading, full-screen experience on the web. And yes, we're talking about like this kind of stories, like full-screen, portrait. But these aren't the kind of standard walled garden stories. The biggest advantage that we have with the current implementations is their ephemerality and ultra-low barrier to creation. But the stories format can also work beyond the ephemeral use case and become its own pillar in the open web media landscape. And that's because they're really just cheaper to make than video and much more engaging than a plain old text article. And really important, web stories are different to walled off stories in many, many important ways. So just like a regular web page, you own them, you host them, and very important, you get like the money from the ads, not the platform that's serving the stories. And because stories are really a visual format, both Google Search and the Discover teams are showcasing them in these really cool ways, with indications that many more integrations are coming later this year. So we think these can be great, net new traffic sources for your content and for web creators in general. So, but you ask, of course, what's the easiest way to get started creating? Well, good question. If we want the web to be able to compete with the closed platforms out there, story creation needs to be as intuitive and fast for all content creators. Now, lots of people are working on making web stories a thing, but one of the things that is most exciting here is that story creation is coming to WordPress, the most used CMS in the world. And that's in the form of a visual story editor, which is coming to you very soon. If you register at the link here, you'll be notified as soon as the beta is out. You'll hopefully see all the basic editing features you'd expect, like smooth image and video handling, text controls, shape masking, and so on. And the Google team is also working on some stuff you might not expect, like this one that we call Text Magic, which is running in real time against images from the Unsplash API here. So toggled on, this feature makes it so that the editor always ensures that text is readable, making dynamic decisions about the background, the line height, and so on. So stay tuned and read more on amp.dev/about/stories. And yeah, just thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And just a reminder that, all the sessions from web.dev live are now available online. So, I really hope to see you in Sri Lanka in person one of these days. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sam, for educating us on this new developer tools and the web performance tools. And that's all for the Web Dev Live Extended Sri Lanka Day 1. Tomorrow we will be having 2 sessions. One in a topic of what's new in Puppeteer by Jacqueline Yin, and the next one is a basic course in AMP by Ben Morris. And thank you again, Sam, for providing us with this. And thank you everybody for joining. And let's wind up the session. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. So yeah.